Hey, what's up? It's Jesko again from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. So in this video, I want to talk about the ideal home studio space, right? So if you're looking at designing, building your own home studio, maybe you've got some options, or you're just kind of wondering if the room that you're looking at is suitable for your home studio, I want to give you 3 things to watch out for that kind of make the ideal space to build your home studio. But before I get into that, just real quick, maybe you're wondering what legitimizes me to talk about all this stuff, right? How do I actually know what a home studio mixer needs in terms of acoustics, in terms of the sound in the room? And maybe you're just wondering also what kind of mix work I work on. So I just want to give a quick shout out to my buddy Cord, aka Robosonic, and the new song Supposed to Be. This is out on Armada Subject. It's with Jess Bays and Raw. So this is a song I mixed over the past, I mixed maybe 2-3 months ago. It's been a while it took a while until it came out. The usual bureaucracy with labels and stuff, I guess, release schedules and all that. But if you want to have a listen to the kind of work that I don't do that much mixing work these days anymore. It's more of a kind of a fun or like a hobby nowadays. Again, after working professionally as a mixing engineer for 10 years. But if you want to have a listen to some of the stuff that I've worked on, and it's in particular something that I've worked on released recently, have a listen to Supposed to Do. I'll put it in the link in the description. But with that, let's get back to the topic of choosing a space for your home studio and the 3 things that make up the ideal space. A quick preface. I find it a bit difficult when I talk about ideals with home studios, right? Because you're probably never going to find this space. You might be able to get it if you build from scratch, yeah? But the reality of it is we have to live with kind of what we're given, right? And in most cases, you might not even reach one of these ideals that I'm about to tell you about. And I just want to preface this by saying, don't worry about it, okay? Acoustics involves taking a lot of little steps in the right direction, right? There are very few of these steps that make or break the sound in your room. There are a few ones, and I'll mention them, but I don't want you to obsess over any of this, because in most likelihood, you won't be able to do anything about them anyway, and you just have to deal with what you get and do the best with what you get, right? And that's what we all work with. That's kind of the circumstances that we're all in, and I don't think you need to worry about this any more than is absolutely necessary, which basically means be aware of some of these ideals, be aware of what you're looking for, or that what you're kind of striving to achieve in terms of the raw space. But that's about it, right? Make a note of it, see how close you can get, and then move on. So with that, let's talk about the first one, and that is the shape and size. And I've prepared a little example room here just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, right? So let's talk shape first of all. And this is all about choosing dimensions, ratios of dimensions, aka length, width, and height, in order to distribute the room mode pattern that you get in that particular space as evenly as possible. And something like the AmRock room mode calculator can help you do that. The way it kind of shows you that that's what you've achieved is this graph up here, where each of these lines represents one of the room modes that gets created at all these different frequencies, and you want this spread as evenly as possible. What you don't want is kind of bunching up of room modes like right here or up here, but this is fairly high up in frequency, which makes it easier to treat. If you play around with these dimensions, you'll find it's pretty difficult to find a set of ratios that is absolutely perfect. There are, like this one, there are some that get pretty close, but there are always going to be slight pile-ups somewhere. So again, this isn't something you need to totally obsess over. But that's kind of what you're trying to do with the shape. I'll also link a video on how you do this in practice as an example in the card. so you can check it out and see what that looks like for your particular room. So that's the shape. Shoebox shaped and optimizing the ratio of dimensions. We don't want any angled walls. We don't want any diamond shapes. All of that stuff is in the past. What we want these days is nice and predictable, especially for your home studio. If you start angling walls, that means that the pattern of room modes becomes very unpredictable. It might work out perfectly, but it might also be just a massive jumble where you get massive pileups and massive holes because the room mode pattern isn't balanced. Yeah. So what we're going for with this is shoebox shaped parallel walls with the right dimensions in order to make things nice and predictable. Okay. The second part of this is the size. And you see me here picking a size of 24 times 18 times 14 feet. This is a pretty big space. Yeah, the general rule with size is the bigger the better. Yeah, especially when we're talking about kind of your typical bedroom, really small rooms. I'd always go for the bigger room over something that is theoretically better in terms of room mode distribution. Why? Because that gives us more space for treatment, which leaves us more space for the actual usable studio. And with these small rooms, that has a higher priority than the actual shape. Okay, so when we're talking about ideals though, why this big? Well, because when we're talking about full treatment in a room, and I'm not talking about using panels, but an actual build out, we're looking at least, let's say, 3 feet of space all around the room, all around the perimeter and the ceiling. And so with a room this size, we have a lot of space to put in treatment and to still get a room that is actually pretty big in terms of usable floor space. Okay, so that's point number 1. Moving over to point number 2, and that is the placement of the doors and windows. And this is actually pretty simple because the space in a studio, or the parts of the room that are kind of have the least importance, are going to be the back third of the sidewalls, which is why you don't see any treatment in my room over here, because in terms of actual treatment, in terms of absorbing reflections, in terms of this section of the wall causing problematic reflections, that's the least important part. Okay, so if you need windows, if you need a door, obviously you need a door. Let's start with the door. If you place the door, if you have an option to place the door, then you want to put it in the last third of the side walls of this shoebox shaped room. Yeah, because that way anything you do with the door doesn't actually cause any problematic reflections or otherwise. In terms of windows, it's kind of the same. If you want a proper window, ideally you want it in the back third of the room, maybe opposite of the door. Another option would be to have them just kind of higher up on the wall. So not right under the ceiling, because again, ideally we want a lot of ceiling treatment. Yeah, so that 3 feet that I was talking about before. But if you have kind of a long horizontal window that is situated about 3 feet below our ceiling, along the back third of the sidewalls, that's an option. Same, I guess, goes for the front wall. If you need some air, some light from the front wall, then you want something that is kind of situated about 3 feet below the ceiling, somewhere around there. And then it's just kind of a horizontal long window that just lets in light, but leaves the main part of the wall intact. In terms of the style of window, basically what we want is this surface to mimic the same reflection and absorption characteristics as the rest of the wall, right? So we don't want the window recessed. We want it flush with the wall. Ideally, we want the surface of the glass to be as hard, if you will, as the rest of the wall, so that any sound reflecting off of it basically sees just a single stretch of flat wall, right? So that's the idea when we're talking about doors and windows. Everything else, just flat surfaces, flat wall, okay? The third part of this is materials. What are those walls constructed from? And again, when we're talking about ideals, this is pretty easy. We don't want any sound to pass through because that means we have maximum isolation. But basically that means we get maximum reflection, yeah, and the way to do that is just to have very hard, thick walls. Yeah, it's pretty simple. That's kind of the ideal material we're talking about here. So concrete, at the very least, kind of a very hard cinder block or brick wall that is then plastered over, I guess. What we don't want is just flimsy one layer of drywall. Most of the lower frequencies will actually pass through that, which makes it very unpredictable in terms of the room mode pattern on one hand, because then we don't really know what surface those low frequencies actually see outside of our actual room that is kind of set by this flimsy drywall. And at that point, yeah, we get a very unpredictable space. So we want hard surfaces, and we want that material to be the same on all sides. We want symmetry. We want acoustic symmetry, right? So ideally, left and right should be the same material, ideally very, very hard, in order to maximize isolation and also make the room mode pattern predictable. And then we have also a lot of reverb real estate to work with, if you will. A room that with that hard surfaces will have very long reverb times, and that gives us a lot to work with as an acoustician. Yeah, of course we have to reduce that down to something that is usable, but the chance of over damping the room is actually much smaller. In terms of the floor, by the way, when we're talking about materials, a question that I get asked a lot is just go with basically wood or laminate floor. That's the ideal. Yeah, you do want some sort of decoupling layer underneath in order to make it more comfortable to walk on, maybe to retain some heat. But ideally, you just want a wood floor, natural wood or laminate is typically the best. Okay, so it's as simple as that. Yeah, if you're looking for a space, if you're looking for the perfect space, those are the things you need to watch out for. Shape and size, door and window placement, and then materials, ideally hard and symmetrical. Okay? But again, you'll probably have a hard time finding this perfect room. And in particular, if your room doesn't have any of these attributes, that's fine. That's what we're all working with. Almost no rooms are built that way, because obviously any room that isn't specifically built for sound won't have those particular characteristics, right? So don't obsess about this. You can make just about any room. Well, you can improve, first of all, you can improve just about any room. You can make almost any room good enough to work in. Sometimes that means living with the necessary compromises. For example, in a very small room, that might mean shifting your setup very close to one wall, which in turn means a very small stereo triangle, which in turn means a very small desk in order to get that close to the wall. So those are some of the compromises you have to live with, but it's doable. And if you have your priorities straight, if your priority is good sound, you can totally get there, right? You just have to understand that in some rooms, if you want to get a usable sound, you can't get your gigantic 6 foot wide, 10 foot deep. You can't get your huge ass desk in there, which basically puts you in the middle of the room in terms of your listening position, for example. Yeah, that's just something you have to give up on. Yeah, but then it is totally possible. Yeah, so again, don't obsess about this. You can improve just about any room, and you can definitely, with the right compromises, make just about any room workable. Whatever you have is probably good enough. And obviously, if you want some help in figuring out what the steps are that you should be taking in your room, I've got a home studio treatment framework that you can download for free at the link in the description. These are my 5 steps to treat a room and get it to translate so that you know what it is you need to be focusing on at each step of the process of treating a room, right? Obviously, we're talking about positioning our desks and speakers. We're talking about absorption, treatment with porous absorption, treatment with resonance absorption. We're talking about measurements, when to bring those into the game or when to kind of think about that, how to think about that. We're talking about subwoofers, speaker decoupling. It's all in there, but laid out for you in a way, in a kind of a step-by-step process for you to follow so you know what it is you need to focus on at each step of the way. So that's my home studio treatment framework that you can get for free at the link in the description. But with that, let me wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. I hope this taught you something about what you need to be looking for in terms of the ideal space for your home studio. I'll see you in the next video.